Hi friends, we'll be talking to Raashi Shetty today. Raashi is a speech therapist. She's based in Chennai, Vellacheri. She is a therapeutic listening practitioner. She's also a certified oral placement therapist and a Haney certified therapist. She's been working with kids for the last 9 years. Let's listen to what she has to share. Rashi, what are picky eaters, and what can you just elaborate more? Because some kids have strong food preferences. Of course, there is a sensory issue with the whole body and stuff like that. But I would like to know your viewpoint as a speech therapist. What do you feel?
Picky eaters is a very big domain, and what we've seen is there are kids who have issues with the structure of food itself. Forget the texture. When they look visually at a food, they already decide that they won't be able to eat it. Then there is texture issues, like you said. There's sensory issues as well, too hot, too cold. And also I've seen that when there is a oromotor deficit, a kid cannot eat a particular texture, or a particular type of food, so they already are aversive towards it. As soon as they see it, they're like, nahi, mujhse ho nahi paya, so I won't be able to eat it. So then we've seen that such kids become very picky eaters. So either they generalize it to color, या तो फिर a particular texture, they will not want to eat it. So such kids are called picky eaters. We can help these kids by working on them holistically, like we spoke previously as well, where we work on the sensory aspects, and we as speech therapists would also work on that aspect, but oromotor structure wise. So we desensitize them. So there's something called as systematic desensitization, which is a very general term, where we start sensitizing them with a very minimal change from what they are eating presently towards what they refuse to eat. So
What I have read and I've learned, and what studies have shown, that two things I think for parents who are listening, they need to know that there are certain things which are called as food preferences,
yes,
and there is picky eating.
yes,
So food preferences, if a child has, it's okay, but if he's a picky eater, so much so that it comes in the way of the nutrition, that they cannot, like, they cannot survive because they're not eating enough, then I would call it as a picky eater,
yes.
not someone who would have a strong food preference. Na? That is
That is there. And one way that I have read up, and a parent, for them to understand if your child has food preferences or whether he's a picky eater, is by observation. So what happens is, when it's a picky eater, they overgeneralize it. They would start, with a small thing, but they would generalize it, either, like I said, either with color, or just they're looking at the texture itself, they'll be like, nahi, I can't eat it. So if suppose there's like a shira, we call it kesari in South, and something similar to that texture, would everything would be a no-no. But in case he's has preferences, it would be only that particular item. But others that look similar, he or she would eat it.
Yeah.
So that's how they can differentiate between a picky eater and a true friend.
The other thing also to remember, I feel, for parents is that if the child has a food preference, or if he is a picky eater or whatever, any child, no matter if he has no food preference or picky eating, they need at least 30-40 exposures of the same food before they start eating it. So if they're not eating once or twice, they can't say he's a picky eater.
Exactly.
So that's another important thing that I feel parents who are listening need to know. The other important thing that I feel also is that in today's world, it's become like, like we want our kids to just listen to us. I've told you, I've given you, you should be eating it. So that also we need to know that kids have a mind of their own.
Yes.
Sometimes they choose not to, and it may not be necessarily related to picky eating. So, these two things, one about food preferences, one about giving enough exposure that the child has eaten, exposed, maybe not eaten, but even taken in the mouth and left it, it's okay. But if he gets that, so once all that has been tried, and then still they find it's difficult, then we could move towards picky eating. But over diagnosing it wouldn't help. The other thing what I wanted to share was, in my experience, I found that whenever these few primitive reflexes like moro, or an intrauterine reflex like fear paralysis reflex, when they are present, then the the face and the head, and thus the oral motor system also becomes oversensitive, hypersensitive. So when we work on those particular things, at least in my practice, where the therapist have not worked directly on eating, but the speech therapist with whom they've not worked on eating or feeding, but we've only worked on integrating those reflexes, and then they start eating well. Of course, sometimes I would say around 50% of the times they had the need to do the feeding therapy also. But then it's important to understand that there could be many reasons, and if all of them are addressed and not overdiagnosed, then we understand more about picky
I
eating.
would actually like to add on to this. There are another two primitive reflex where, as a feeding therapist, which I normally look at is gag reflex and a suck swallow reflex. So even when I've seen when these are not integrated well, gag reflex is something that all of us, it's lifelong, but it depends on how much of it is percentage of it is there. Just some kids, you just take the finger near their lip and they're gagging. So
People need to know what is gag. When they see the food, they go, like they're just about to vomit. So that is a gag reflex.
also when we eat something and something behind at the rear end of our palate, you feel that weird sensation and we tend to gag as well. When we vomit, we use the gag reflex. So that is a gag reflex.
So an oversensitive gag is not something very good, but gag is a lifelong and it is protective.
Yes, it's a protective thing. So it again, like you said, you need not like over generalize or over diagnose it. But there is, and when there is an issue with gag reflex, also we've seen kids have a lot of issue with feeding. That's what we've seen.
So I would also like to add up, because it's great, because people who are listening get that information, because it's like when that FPR, the fear paralysis reflex, and the Moro, sometimes even when Babkin reflex is present, because it's a hand mouth reflex, when these are present, then we would also see exaggerated gag, but when we work on these, we see that many a times the gag starts becoming normalized.
So like we spoke previously also, the whole, if we,
The whole body
approach.
It's not just oral and just body
In
and
case-
just thought.
True. In case we kind of, interrelate, like and as an occupational therapist, put in your knowledge, and I as a speech therapist, like now if
And in that knowledge, if parents can put their viewpoints and provide us what you call a base where the parent is not getting stressed out, even if the child is not eating. Because if the parent gets stressed out, then those gag and babkin and all would also increase even more. No? So I think speech, OT, and parents being calmer is very important. Yeah, you were saying something. I'm sorry.
No. I was just, I totally agree with you. I was just saying that because it's a holistic thing, like we've been telling it since the start, where all of us play a part. I've also, like you said, when the parents are worked up, the child automatically gets worked up. It's that emotional connect. It's
co-regulation.
Yeah, it's co-regulation. So, and that's what we've seen. So when we all interrelate, when you work on the, reflexes like oro and everything, and we work on gag, at least reducing it, through therapy, and we work on suck swallow reflex.
And I forgot, I mean, you're also certified in therapeutic listening. And if you see, when you do a lot of music, modulated music, and even quick shifts, which are working on oral motor system, then the system gets better. It starts getting desensitized. Yeah. Na?